Good morning. For two big reasons, I'm going to go inside here today in Duc in Altum. And one of the reasons is because we don't have a sunrise in the sky, a visible sun disk. And the other one is because today's gospel is precisely Duc in Altum. Let's go back and see that, in case somebody didn't notice. This is Duc in Altum. And I have a big question for you. To whom do you belong? To whom do you belong? We have a lot of ground to cover today. Beautiful. Every day of our lives we cover ground. The hinges need a little oil. Oh boy, and I forgot. Okay, so you're still here. So we're inside Duc in Altum. And the gospel story is all about that today. About the words Duc in Altum. And the scene of Duc in Altum is precisely that boat over there that's in the gospel today. And what I've been telling the pilgrims recently is that there were so many people around, Jesus couldn't teach. So they were all trying to get selfies with Jesus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Let me get in your boat and teach from there. And then it will work." And so Jesus gets into Peter's boat and he teaches and it works. And then he says to Peter, "Go out into the deep." And so that's the idea here of the architecture, is that this boat is actually visibly floating on the Sea of Galilee because of the combination of the marble from Norway and the infinity pool outside, the way the artists and architects conceived this space, and Father Juan Solana. Then there we have this space out into the water. Go out into the deep. And this is Luke chapter 5, the opening story of Luke chapter 5. And here we have it. But there's a bigger deep for us, well, not a bigger deep, but there's a very big deep for us today in the readings. And my question to you is, to whom do you belong? To whom do you belong? Now, Corinth, where Paul is addressing the people in his letter to the Corinthians, is a 500,000 people city, and probably also lots of undocumented slaves and so forth. So it's a very, very large city in the Roman Empire, and it's a trading city between east and west of Mediterranean. And so we have all these diversity of cultures and peoples and ethnic origins and religions. And Christianity comes there as a small little startup into this very cosmopolitan, multicultural reality. And so this is the environment of the letter. And the way our world works is we build parties, not just political parties, but even in family, lobbying, interests. People are always associating with others for different purposes. And that's also wonderful, because there are many tasks and challenges and we need to associate with each other. And we're inspired by certain leaders in all different environments and sectors, in business and politics, in society, in entertainment, and exploration, and knowledge, and studies. We follow certain gurus for the news, for the weather, and we tend to think we belong to them. Like, I belong to this university, and I belong to this political party. And the worst part of it is that the parties think you belong to them as well. And they treat you as a belonging, as a possession. And they claim on you. And then when the totalitarian levels develop, then you're totally belonging and you're totally a pawn. And from ancient times, you know, cannon fodder. So this is part of the history of humanity. And the message Paul is bringing is amazing. It's a revolution. So I have the question again for you. To whom do you belong? To whom do you belong? To Paul or to Apollos? And Paul says, no, we belong to you. We are here to serve you. The servant leadership concept, not the ownership leader concept. The servant leadership concept. So what's going to happen is this little seedling, this little small plant that's planted now in Corinth with this group of disciples who are nourished from the scriptures, and they're meeting regularly on the first day of the week to break bread, like in the practice of Jesus' disciples from the very beginning, like he broke bread on the day of the resurrection and the day of Pentecost and the day of the 8th day after the resurrection. It became the standard, the breaking of the bread. It's one of the traits of the community from the very beginning on the first day of the week. And now this community isn't belonging to Paul. He started, but he can't own it in the sense of possession, of dominion. No, he's a servant. They're not there to serve him. He's there to serve them, to get to know Christ, to get to know who they are. And he says, you don't belong to Paul or to Apollos. You don't belong to me. Some people become very possessive. It's a normal human trait. We probably shouldn't be too judgmental about it because it happens to all of us. And we tend to claim, like people say, my children. Okay, we understand. You were blessed to collaborate in God's creative work and to bring these children to life. But they're God's children. God doesn't have any grandchildren. To whom do you belong? You know, the Corinthians letter is an amazing letter. It has probably the oldest confession of faith, formal confession of faith of Christianity. It has the oldest account of the Last Supper, which was so treasured already, so incredibly understood, totally deeply connected with the breaking of the bread on the first day of the week. It has just an approach to the faith that's totally fresh. It's the very beginning. It's in the early 50s. It's within total living memory of Jesus' disciples and community. It's happening, and it's an amazing thing about our writings in the New Testament, that they are so close to the original facts. Many of the other writings, for all good reasons, are much later. And so we have a real touchstone there with great treasure. And when we're hearing, I had a question for myself this morning and I didn't have a chance to research it. Maybe there's somebody learned here that can do that. Obviously these letters were written in Greek because the people are in Greece, in Corinth. And that was the language, the culture language of the time. Just like most documents around the world today are probably written in English, for a lot of the world at least. Then it was written in Greek. And when you say, Paul says to them, you belong to Christ. And what I'm just curious about, if the word he uses is Kyriakos, and if that's the case, then it's probably one of the very first instances of the root of the word church, which is amazing. Because the word church, Kyriakos, gives us the German Kirche. Oh, a huge fish just jumped there. Maybe you saw it because it was in the screen. Just a little bit to the left of that little barge thing floating there. A huge fish jumped on the water there. I love those moments when a fish jumps. I find it like a special little treat from creation for me. And so, here we have this lady here enjoying her moments in the water at a hope for sunrise that didn't appear. Kyriakos, belonging to the Lord, belonging to, Kyrios is Lord, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Kyriakos, belonging to the Lord. Belonging to the Lord. And that gives us Kirche, and maybe some of you have seen some churches called Kirk on the hills or something like that. It's a common usage in some confessions of faith. Kirk, and that's where the word church comes from in English. So church means belonging to the Lord. You are church because you belong to the Lord. There's so much to ponder there. And then he says, and Christ belongs to the Father. Of course, the Blessed Trinity. So that's a huge cultural paradigm shift, of self-awareness shift, of identity shift. We belong to the Lord. We don't belong to even a golf club. We don't belong to a political party. We don't belong to an ideology. We don't belong to dictators and totalitarian regimes. We belong to the Lord. That's a revolution. And if we look at Peter going out into the deep, duc in altum, what does he say at the end? He does exactly what Jesus wants him to do. He belongs to the Lord. And so he is church. He does what Jesus wants him to do. He belongs to him. And Jesus doesn't enslave. Jesus frees us. And he frees Peter from his fear to go out into the deep, to cast his nets again, to make that new effort to reconciliation in a family that's a bit dysfunctional, to give hope to a child who's very despondent and discouraged, to help a marriage that's struggling, to go out into the deep, to help somebody who's sick and floundering in their health. We have two priests, brother priests, one is quite a bit younger than me, and another priest who is one of our first from Ireland, and they're both very, very, very advanced in their sufferings right now and their illness. So you might want to say a priest for Father Thomas and Father Carlos. And this is to do something, also a prayer for somebody that's floundering, to help them to go through, to go out into the deep. People, we live in a great mystery. There's great meaning in our lives. We shouldn't be enslaved to the paradigms of economy and politics and success. All of these structures are to serve the dignity of the human being. And so we have to always regain the freedom of the human being and the dignity of the human being that's above all these structures, that can blacken out the richness of the human person. And we go up for the light. We want to belong to the Lord. This is a cultural shift, a paradigm shift, an amazing transformation of mentality. People, we'll leave it like that for today. God bless you. See you later, alligators. Let's switch this around here. Bring light into the world. Be a sunshine today for those who need it. God bless you.